Welcome to an episode of Jay Lenos Garage. We're here today to talk about one of the most legendary and iconic cars of all time. This is the Shelby Brock Daytona Coupe. You might remember these cars dominated back in the 60s, designed by Pete Brock, of course, legendary Pete Brock, who did the Corvette Stingray and a number of other things. This is not one of the original cars. There are only, I believe, 6 of those, and there's one at the Simeone Museum in Philadelphia, probably the most famous one. And everyone has a story, and this one has a story too. Let's meet the owner, Bruce Goldsmith. Bruce, come on in. How you doing?
Good to see you, Jay.
Well, you've just done a beautiful job on this car.
Thank you.
Tell people what we have here.
Well, this originally was a Superformance-built car. Now, how that came about was Pete Brock was given the opportunity of re-engineering the car from the 60s, 50 years later.
Right.
And so he and Bob Nykstad, who designed the suspension on the 427 Cobras and on the 4 GTs, essentially built what could be a new version of what might have been had they been able to put that in production 50 years later.
Right, right. Okay, so the term kit car would not be fair here.
No, this is Pete Brock designed car. Just
right, okay.
And then, of course, in my fanaticism over sort of fighting against the mundane in life, you know, I had to take this to the level of making it the best possible one of these I could possibly do.
Yeah, well, you will see what he's talking about in just a minute when we go through some of the details of this automobile. But it is just beautifully done. And I remember when Pete Brock designed this with this cam tail, I remember people thought, well, that's ridiculous. Why not have it slope back like the back of the Alfa? I mean, but it was actually much more aerodynamic.
Well, Professor Cam in the 30s did a lot of aerodynamic studies on these things and found that it was much more efficient to chop the tail off rather than having the turbulence of the...
Right.
Because the air will only sort of conform to a certain angle. So when he designed this thing, the original, this is a funny part of the story, the 289 Cobra was essentially a brick.
Right.
And it would not go more than about 160 miles an hour no matter how much power you put into it. Mm-hmm. But when they wanted to race Ferrari for the European FIA Championship, the GT Championship, they needed something that was more aerodynamic. And so he convinced Shelby to let him design this car. Shelby was very skeptical. It cost $3,000.
Oh, it's ridiculous.
To build the aluminum body then.
Yeah.
And anyway, they took it to Riverside, and the first time they ran it, it ran 3 seconds faster than the 289 with the same engine, same chassis, same everything. So it proved the point. Eventually they got up to 200 miles an hour.
Yeah, I remember reading in Road and Track and Car and Driver, Sports Car Graphic, it was a pretty controversial design because people thought, well, why don't you just chop the back? That looks weird. I mean, it didn't seem aerodynamic. It didn't seem like a teardrop. Everybody thought things should taper off. So it was fascinating. And, you know, Pete Brock, God, when he was here not long ago, and I thought he would be like 90 or 100 years old, because when you're 13 and the guy is 22, well, he might as well be 50, you know. So to me, it's pretty amazing that he did all this at such a young age. Okay, so what did you start with?
Well, we started with the car arrives in the United States without an engine, without a transmission. This particular car was one of the last ones built. Mm-hmm. Shelby took this car. He actually bought the car, put it in his museum in Las Vegas, covered it with decals to look like one of the original Daytona Coupes, and it sat there for a year.
Yeah, he was a character.
Yeah, he was.
Carroll Shelby, God bless him, we love him. Yeah. He's a friend of mine. But hey, you know, you play that Shelby. Hey, you know, no, sorry, your wallet's gone. Hey, what happened? You know, so he always used to make me laugh because every car he had was the greatest car. Jay, you got to buy this car. You know, he'd always try to sell me something. And he always used to make me laugh. So he had this.
So this was sitting in the museum. Yeah. I'm guessing it had some, you know, concrete blocks under the hood because there was no engine to make it look like it sat right. Anyway, so I bought it from them. Then we put it together, got it licensed, put an engine in it, and then we took the car completely apart. And Steve Wood of Panavia.com did all the incredible engineering on it. But we worked on this thing. This was '99. Now it's 5 years later. It's finally in a finished state.
Now Panavia, I've heard of him, and he's like the foremost authority on these cars?
He's like the West Coast genius for Daytona Coupes. and Cobras.
You know, that's the fun thing about being in the car hobby. Do you remember the book Fahrenheit 451?
Sure, yeah.
Where all the books are burned, but they're guys that just walk around and memorize every book and know everything about that book.
Yeah.
Well, there's always a guy that knows everything about one particular car, and that's their whole life. They can tell you it was built on a Tuesday by a guy named Larry, and he was sick on Wednesday, and his friend Jim. I mean, they're just hilarious to me, and I love those guys. I love those.
And there's a lot of stuff in this car that was built by the guy who's the seat fanatic and the guy who's like EVOD Industries built these wheels. These are billet wheels that are 12 inches wide in the back, 10 inches wide in the front. The car comes with brakes that are C5 Corvette brakes.
Right.
They're 4-piston calipers with 2 passive, 2 active. So we changed it to a C6 brake, which has six active pistons. So your eyeballs fall out when you stop.
I'm surprised you didn't go for the period American mag looking back in the day.
Well, this was my taste.
Right.
Okay, because
they
they didn't have fenders like this either.
Yeah.
But what these are in the sense of the Eagle Formula One racing wheels from the 60s. And if you look at their Formula One cars, they'll resemble these a little bit.
Now, tell me, what is the chassis? Is the chassis designed by Pete as well?
Yeah, by Bob Nykstad. He designed the 427 Cobra and the GT40 suspension. The chassis is a space frame. It's a welded steel tube space frame, much more advanced than the original 289 Cobras.
Okay.
It's got long, incredibly interesting independent suspension all the way around. In the back, it's got lower A-arms that go all the way to differential, like a Formula One car from the 60s.
Okay.
So the wheels are always, perpendicular to the road.
And we're talking fiberglass body?
Fiberglass body.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very nice.
I'll show you a really interesting thing. We'll start in the back.
Okay.
So as you know, when you raced at Le Mans in the 60s, you had to carry a spare tire.
Yeah, that was the law, wasn't it?
Yeah. Now, this spare tire would fill up the entire car. So what we did is we built a billet tire that's 4 inches thick and put a motorcycle tire on it which can carry the weight. So if I get a flat on the road, I can take the knock off. I don't have to carry a wheel that's won't fit in the car. You see that?
Oh, I see. Yeah. Okay, very cool. Nicely done. Nicely done. And here, of course, is that famous cam tail we were talking about. Did the original car have a spoiler here as well?
Well, there's a wonderful story about that. They ran the car at Spa, which, as you know, is a really high-speed course, and Phil Hill was driving it. And as the story went, he came in, he said the car is uncontrollable. And Peter had originally designed the car with like a little bit of wing that was over here. Shelby didn't want to spend the money to build the wing. So Phil Remington, who was one of the great fabricators of all time, had seen on the 250 GTO Ferraris that were beating the car at Spa that they had a little flat piece of metal here. So he cut with tin snips sheets of aluminum and riveted them to the back of the car. And Phil Hill took the car out and said, "This is terrific. Don't do anything else."
Wow.
Because the tail was getting light without
Gotcha. What was the original coefficient of drag on this car? Do you know?
Well, I'm told it was 0.28. It's probably a little bit different because of the fender flares.
Right. Okay. It's funny. Early cars like the Tatra has 0.24, but they weren't fast enough to worry about downforce, so they could be really aerodynamic, So modern cars,
that's funny.
Like the P1 McLaren and some of those, the coefficient of drag isn't that low because they got that big wing. They've got 600 pounds of downforce, so it's...
I know, drive upside down in a tube.
All that kind of stuff. Let's open her up, see what she looks like.
Okay, you got yours? Pull it out.
Yeah. Okay. Ooh.
So what this is a 427 Windsor, all aluminum engine, built by QMP Racing, Brad Lagman.
Now, when you say a 427 Windsor, is that a 351 block that's taken to
Bored and stroked, yeah.
Okay.
It weighs about 100 pounds less than a steel block version of the same engine.
Right, okay. And I love those headers. Look where they go out to the side like that. That's amazing.
Well, these were the technology now is so interesting because you engineer the headers to the volumetric efficiency of the engine. So Jack Burns engineered the headers. Chris Parker built these things. He's an artist with stainless steel. These shock absorbers are Wilbur shocks. They're German-made shocks with triple adjustable shocks. I mean, there's interesting things. This is called a height pressure adjuster, so you can reduce and alter your steering pressure to the car and dial in exactly what you're comfortable with feel.
Very nice.
The radiator that's there is not the standard Superformance radiator.
Right.
It's a double pass radiator that Steve Wood engineered, built by Ron Davis in Arizona. to cool this big engine.
Right.
It never overheats. It's,
And you've got air conditioning in it as well. Very
you,
nice.
you have to have air conditioning.
Yeah, beautifully done.
There's a really nifty thing about this hood. You see these outlets right here? This is what
Yeah.
Peter designed. This lets air in through the front end, through a double layer. So that as the car's going, the nose draws in air, takes it through there and drives it into here without getting hot air in the thing. The air is coming in through the radiator
Right.
and through the fans and out here. So it's
Yeah.
not cooling the motor. But if you look down here, you can see this little slot.
Right.
That slot is the double, the hollow area inside the hood, and it's putting air right into the carburetor.
And is that, did you do that or is that stock?
That's stock. That's Peter Brock and
right.
Bob
Very
Neistad.
nice. Is that an oil cooler in there as well?
That's an oil cooler, yeah.
Very good. What transmission do you use?
It's a T600.
Okay.
It's a 5-speed. One of the things we do with the engine, which is very interesting, is, a lot of people with these cars put in engines that go to 8,000 RPM, and so they have to
Right.
put in 6 speeds and they're shifting like crazy, but
Right.
you're driving on the street.
Yeah.
So we built the engine to be a broad spectrum power engine, so it's got 500 pounds of torque starting at about 3,000 RPM through 6,000, so it's really comfortable with a 5-speed.
And what kind of horsepower are you getting?
580.
Oh, very
this is a modest amount of horsepower these
Right.
days for Cobra kind
Yeah,
of stuff.
I know.
You got these maniacs who want 800, 1,000.
It says Daytona GTB.
My first name is Bruce.
Oh, okay. GT Bruce. All right, very good. Are you married?
I am married, yes.
So yeah, did your wife get a kick out of this as well?
Less than I do, but
Less
she
than you.
does.
Yeah, like, welcome to, I understand. I understand. The married guys, you know how that works. Very good.
You know what the normal Cobra seats look like.
Right.
These are seats built by GTC Classics.
Very nice.
And I guess you'd say they're similar to what was done in the 60s.
But more comfortable.
Much more comfortable.
Yeah.
And much more, they're lower to the floor, a lot more headroom, a lot more side support. So
And where are we pulling air in here for what?
foot boxes.
Oh, just for the foot
Just to
box,
keep
okay.
it cool.
Okay.
You got that engine sitting there, and they got,
Gotcha,
they got a double
gotcha.
layer around the foot boxes.
Can you open and close those when you run?
No, but you want them open, truthfully.
Okay, even
This
in
thing-
cold weather. Huh?
You want them open.
Yeah. I think it's time to go for a ride. And we should explain a little about Super Performance. They build the bodies in South Africa?
High tech is what it's called in South Africa.
Oh, now it's high tech.
No,
Okay.
that's what the factory is called in South Africa.
Oh, okay.
And they build them under contract for Super Performance in the United States.
Oh, I see. Okay. You know, it's the mid-range, which is so much fun in this. You know, it's loud, but not obnoxiously loud. It's very nice. The only mechanical noise you hear really is the exhaust.
When you can roll up the windows if you want to get rid of most of that.
Yeah.
Then you have to turn on the air conditioning.
Yeah.
Or you have a sauna.
Yeah. What rear end ratio do you have in this?
It's a 342.
Oh, 342. That's an unusual ratio.
Well, that's what it is. Yeah, it's an Australian-built differential, a Dana differential built in Australia.
Okay.
And then we've changed all the half shafts to high-end 930 turbo German half shafts, so they can take the horsepower of the engine.
Yeah.
We've gone through the car. Every single nut and bolt in this car has been replaced with American grade 8 or better bolts.
Where's the horn? Oh, there it is. Okay.
It's British.
Yeah.
It's near the natives, you know. You know, there's all these wonderful jokes, car jokes, about British cars. You know, like why couldn't the British ever invent and build personal computers? Couldn't figure out a way to get them to leak oil.
Yeah, that's funny.
You know, you have to be a person of a certain age to get those jokes.
Well, water temperature, we're in California. It's about 75, 80 degrees today. We've been sitting in traffic. We're about 185, which is perfect. Gearbox is very nice. Clutch, very progressive.
You know, one of the things we were talking about this earlier, the people build Cobras or these kind of cars, and they put in engines which rev to 8,000 RPM.
Right.
But they've got a power range of between 6 and 8.
Yeah.
So they need the 6-speed in order to keep the thing up in that range.
Do you track this car, or is it just a street car?
We've just got it stable now. I mean,
Yeah.
It's shocking if you want to get you know this very well. If you want to get a car to really develop it so it's comfortable, it takes a lot of time and a lot of hours and a lot of That's all.
It does. It takes
And a few
takes
bucks,
a lot.
too.
Yeah, it takes a lot.
But people don't understand that. If you've got General Motors, you've got 600 engineers working on it.
How many of these coupes are currently in the United States now? Do you know?
Well, there's nothing that looks like this in the United States.
Yeah.
The standard ones is probably 50 or 60.
Yeah. Well, this is the nicest one I've ever seen. I first saw this car at Pebble Beach.
Yeah.
And you got to display it at Pebble, correct?
Yeah, with Peter's.
Yeah, I mean, that's quite an honor because most remanufactured, or I hate the word replica,
Yeah, no, you're right.
you don't get invited to Pebble Beach.
Yeah.
So that shows you this is a cut above.
But you can see driving it. This is not like a replica car. This is
Right.
a well-engineered machine. Also, Peter is such a lovely guy. You know, there's a community of coupe owners.
Yeah. You know, at 60 miles an hour in fifth gear, you turn at about 2,100 RPM. So mileage is probably not too bad, huh?
It's like a Prius.
Huh? Like a Prius. Yeah, I'm sure it is.
It goes where you point it. You know, it doesn't get weird.
No, not at all. Sight lines are all very good. You know, it's a very nice driving car. You can drive it fast without scaring yourself to death because it's very predictable. Well, what an impressive machine this is. I want to thank Bruce. Bruce, thank you very much. And this is Steve Wood. Steve, come on in here.
Greetings, Jay. Good to see
How
you.
are you? He's kind of the foremost authority on these deals. And it's Panavia, right?
Panavia.
What's your website?
Yeah, www.panavia.com. We're in Silicon Valley.
Yeah, and if you want to know more about these cars, these Brock Coupes, well, you do other stuff, right? Corvettes?
Oh,
and everything.
Corvettes, Cobras,
Yeah,
making the American dream happen.
Yeah, making the American dream happen. There you go. Here's a car salesman for you. But it's fun to see somebody put so much passion into a vehicle like this. It's just a matter of getting it better and better and better. And boy, you know, the whole thing of having these cars is making them fun to drive because it doesn't overheat, it stops nicely, it's very compliant, it drives nicely on the road. It's just a beautiful, beautiful car, Bruce. So congratulations on all the work you've done.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks for bringing this by. So,
My pleasure.
and go to the Simeone Museum. You can see the famous, that's the one that ran at Le Mans, right?
2287. That's the one that was built in Southern California by hot rodders.
Right, right. And Phil Spector used to own that car. Oh, the huge story. There's a story on all of these cars. There were 6 of the originals built, and this is just carrying on the tradition. So, Steve, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate it. See you guys next week.
Mm-hmm.